I have brought notes with me this evening, and these notes are not actually to make sure that I have a lot to say, but actually to keep me in a realistic frame. Because I want to talk this evening, my theme is what the tarot has something to offer everyone. And that's a huge topic. I could speak on it for hours and hours and hours, and I only have 1 hour. So I'm going to try and stick to this paper. So let's start with thinking about who is interested in the tarot. And if you look around the room, everyone you see here obviously is interested in the tarot. For the sake of the discussion today, I'm going to divide the people who are interested in the tarot into 2 groups. However, those 2 groups are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They cross over both sides. So the 2 groups are the people, there is one group who are people who love to have their readings done. They want to go and see a professional tarot reader, and they want to sit across from them, and they want to be caught up in the mystery, and they want to hear about their story. And they don't want to know really what card means what the positions mean. They're not really interested in it from a study point of view. They just really love to have their cards read. Those are people that I refer to as clients. Then there is another group of people who love to study the tarot cards. They're hooked into it at some early point in their exposure, and they say, this is for me, and they want to study it, and they go into it in some depth. And then within that group, there are great variations. There are some people who just want to study it all the time, for hours and hours and hours and years, and there are some who like to pull out the deck every year, kind of play with it a little bit and look at it, and it's in kind of the background of their life for possibly many years as well. I would classify myself in both categories. I love to have my tarot cards read, and I also really became very excited about studying them, and I have been studying them for almost 30 years now. It's a long time. My introduction to the tarot was through a man whom I had chosen to be my life mentor at 19 years of age. I had a reputation, now just to give you a little bit of background, I had a reputation in my family as being something of a card shark. I was always very lucky at cards. I was quite an accomplished euchre and poker player by the time I was 12. I loved cards. I thought cards were a lot of fun, and I often won. So I was working at a fishing lodge between first and second year university, and it was a very secluded place. It was a beautiful place up north, Sheffield, Ontario, about 500 miles north of Toronto. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the area, but in 1974, it was a very wild place to be, very quiet. And I had I'd taken a job up there as a dishwasher, and this fellow that I'd chosen to be my life mentor was a fishing guide. Very romantic figure he cut. You can imagine 1974, long, wild, curly hair and a big beard. You know, he spent summers down in Zihuatanejo in Mexico, and so I just thought he was amazing. One evening we were sitting down together, and he pulled out this deck of cards. And I thought, good, we're going to play a game, and this is a ground where I feel very confident. And he pulled out this cardstool, and they were all wrapped in this nice purple cloth. He lit some incense and some candles. So I knew that this was a moment. This was not any way that I'd ever played cards before. He took out the deck, and he shuffled them. And I said, what game are we going to play? And he said, well, actually, we're not going to play a game. I'm going to lay the cards out, and these cards are going to tell us something about us. And I thought, these cards are going to tell us something about us. That's amazing. What kind of cards are these? So he shuffled the cards, and he dealt the first card. And the first card to turn over was this card. And I'm just going to put it up for you here so that you can see it. It's helpful to be right side up. This is the Lover's card. And I had never seen a major arcana, as most of you probably have not. The major arcana in the tarot is not a part of the regular playing deck. So I had never seen a card like that before. And the fact that it had been turned over in that moment had stopped me in my tracks. get a deck of tarot cards. That was my first step. I had to do that as soon as possible. Now, of course, in Northern Ontario in 1974, the chances of finding a tarot deck in a town of 6,000 people was very remote. But, so I had to wait a couple of months. And as soon as I got back to Toronto, I went on to Harvard Street. There was a bookstore there called the Fifth Kingdom. It was the only place that you could find a tarot deck, probably within 1,000 miles. You might be able to get one in Ottawa or Montreal, but that would have been it. Anyway, I went down to the store and I picked out my very first deck, and that was the Waite deck. It was there was only 2 decks to choose from at that time, the Crowley and the Waite. And because the Lover's card had been in the Waite deck, I recognized it, and that was the one I went for. So I proceeded my study of the tarot. Now, the tarot is 78 cards. It's a fairly large deck, and each card has a multitude of meanings. I have a good memory. I've often been told that I have an excellent memory, but I couldn't get the meanings of those cards to stick in my brain. And every time I would go back and study them and try and memorize more, I'd figure out, I think, why can't I remember this from one day to the next? And I practiced my readings. I would do the layouts and practice and so on. But it was a lot more difficult than I thought it was. Now, when I asked this fellow how he read them, he said he didn't bother memorizing the cards. He read them through an intuitive sense. And some people will tell you that about the tarot, that they work with the tarot from an intuitive perspective. They don't bother to try and jam all this information into their mind. They rely on intuition. And I'll speak more to that in a minute. So, the tarot, let's talk about the tarot a little bit. The tarot has long been regarded as a complex, multicultural, psychospiritual depiction of human development. Each card in the tarot has a classic meaning, which means that each card in the tarot does have a meaning. It doesn't matter which deck you pick up, the meanings are fairly consistent across all decks. There are some variations. There's some variations on the characters in a tarot. There's slight variations in the meaning, but for the most part, all tarot decks will carry the same meaning. Whether you're looking at the Lovers in the Waite deck or you're looking at a more recent deck, they'll still carry the same meaning. And intuitive readers, they stay with intuition. There are intuitive readers that just find that they can look at the cards, they can carry themselves into the visuals, the symbols, the metaphors, and out of that pull an interpretation for that card. And that's every bit as valid in terms of reading. So from 1974, when I met the tarot deck, until 1975, I wrestled with it and struggled, and decided that for some reason I was not going to be able to memorize this deck of cards. And I put it on a shelf, as many people do. I put it away. And I thought, I'm never going to get this, so it'll just stay there. Until in 1985. So I left it alone for 10 years. In 1985, I went back at the tarot with a renewed commitment. I discovered the Mother Peace deck at the women's bookstore in Toronto. And when I found that deck, I found my deck. That was the deck that I was really comfortable with. When I met Mother Peace, I knew nothing would stop me from learning this deck inside out. I read Vicki Noble's text twice, underlining and practicing and practicing and practicing. And within a year, I had developed finally some confidence in reading the deck for strangers. So that's how long it took. But I was very motivated. There is an element to reading the tarot well, which is equally significant, and that is intuition. I think it's important to have an intuitive sense in reading the tarot. I think that the tarot develops your intuition as well. So it supports the development of that.